Welcome to Wolf's Watch. Today we have a great guest, Veronica Crystal Young. She's had experience both in the corporate world and creative success. She's been a 30-year healthcare executive, an award-winning actress and speaker, a best-selling author. You may have seen her on stage starring in Broadway classics like Sound of Music, South Pacific, and Annie Get Your Gun, or as lead singer with the country band Crystal Whiskey. It's got me so excited. I'm just tripping over my words. This is amazing. As CEO of the production company, Know Your Power 365, Veronica has produced TV cable series pilots, promos, and commercials for, most notable for AFI Red Carpet Promo for the Lifetime Achievement Award for actor and producer Michael Douglas, and the nature series TV ArtScapes, your personal window to the world. Veronica is the author of 2 books, The Other Side of Pain, a guidebook for reclaiming hope and happiness by releasing an abusive or traumatic past, and Shameless, 7 Steps to Reclaim Your Power. Drawing from her own experiences along with transformative healing methods and practices, Veronica shows how to recognize when past trauma is running the show, triggering negative thoughts and emotions in driving self-destructive choices and limiting beliefs. Don't ask where that has presented in my life. Oh my gosh. And she has a story of courage, self-expression that's just amazing, and following your dreams. And she has shared that. She has spoken at, get this, Harvard Club of Boston, NASDAQ, the United States Air Force Academy, and Carnegie Hall, just to name a few. I'm so happy to have Veronica with us today. Veronica, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Jeffrey. So great to be here. I'm honored.
Gosh, it's just amazing with your background of achievement, but also figuring out which buttons to you can always tell the recovering engineer in the group looking for the buttons to press. My gosh. I'm sorry. I have to laugh at myself for it's just, what do you do? It's like,
no
I
problem.
set this up.
Hey,
I
it's live.
5 times. I pressed it.
That's what happens, right? It's live.
I feel like Keith Ledger's character in Batman. He was like, click, 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 click. How come it's not working? But funny. Thank you so much for joining. You just got back from a road trip too.
I did. I just got back. Oh my goodness. I just went to Tahoe for a week and it was gorgeous. Just missed the snow though. I think it's snowed there just when we were leaving, but gorgeous. They have all these new things there with a bike path along the lake and everything. It's just gorgeous. Renewed my soul.
Yes. Recreation, right? Recreate, re-energize. That's what it's about.
Nature does that.
Oh, in the connectedness.
Yeah, absolutely.
As well.
Absolutely.
I just so enjoy that. In reading your background, we've had the opportunity to get to know each other some from other events, or an event that we were both at, actually, and both part of recently. A question that came up in a discussion with someone recently was, we were talking about leadership development and whatnot, and someone raised the question of why is so much of this personal stuff, we're focusing so much on these deeply personal issues, particularly from a leadership perspective, because they're looking out at their organization. It seems that it's just really, leadership is a deeply personal experience.
I believe it is. I've been in leadership for 30 years now in the healthcare field, and it is deeply personal, because if you don't know yourself and know your triggers, know what makes you tick, knows what you can react to, and know what you need to step back from, know what you need to evaluate, know when to speak up, all those things. That's what leadership is. Listening. Oh my goodness, that was a huge one for me, listening, because with my background, I was so wrapped up in trying to protect myself and not speaking up and thinking about what is the next thing to say, that I didn't listen. And that's huge when you're talking about leadership.
Yes, it is. And to fight the tendency, the very human tendency to be caught up in what I'm thinking about saying next, and I miss what you're telling me, what you're communicating. the
It's so
insights that
funny.
you're sharing.
When we talk about listening, I have to share a story with you because I
Oh,
love
please,
this
please.
story. And I was I manager at the hospital, and we have these surveys every year. And the surveys ask, about how the employees are feeling, how they're feeling like they're being listened to. And my survey one year was not so good. So so I asked the employees. I said, I really want to figure out what I'm doing when you feel this way. And someone meekly rose her hand and said, well, when we ask for time off, you just go over it and you say, okay, move on. And we don't feel like you care. And I was like, oh my goodness.
Wow.
I was like, I can't believe that that's the way I was treating them. And so I proceeded to tell them why. Like, my mind goes to, okay, we got to cover this, we got to cover the work, we got to do. But I had to have some empathy. And I
Hmm.
didn't have any because I was in work mode. I was in let me handle it mode, right? Which is
Sure. I can see that. You want time off? Yeah, that's fine. Okay, now let's move on to the next thing. And they're like,
yeah,
well,
exactly. And
okay.
it's, and I felt I really took that in and it really changed the way I managed because I listen a lot more now. I listen and I feel like I exhibit the empathy a lot more than I did before. Because it's not that I didn't have it before. It just was not outward. They didn't feel it. They didn't see
Yes.
it.
Yes. Well, and it's easy in with the time pressure that comes from leading larger, as you rise in organizations, as it becomes
Mhm.
more complex, the time pressure can squeeze out a lot of that because it's
Yeah.
just click, click. I've heard things like key executives have an average of 7 minutes or maybe 15 minutes to devote to each topic
Mm,
that comes to them during a day. It's
mm.
not a lot of time for empathy.
Oh. No, and now it's emails. It's like
Yeah.
200
Oh,
200
yes.
emails a day. Crazy.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned something um, that I want to come back to. It's about listening, but also about speaking up because being in a leadership role, requires being able to at times be able to step in and go, well, wait a minute, and to speak out and make sure that the point's being heard or that someone else that is bringing something critical to the conversation needs to be heard. But that wasn't really part of you weren't comfortable with that early on.
I
Could you
wasn't.
share some of
And
your journey with us? I've had the opportunity to hear some of your story and really would appreciate if you could share some of that because I think a lot of times people see someone who's achieved a lot like yourself and they're like going, oh, well, look, of course she's been on
yeah.
stage. She's been in, high level leadership positions for years. Of course
Mhm.
she, look, I could never do that.
Well, it wasn't always like that. That's for sure. Um, I I grew up here in Southern California, and I have three brothers, no sisters. And my parents met in the Korean War, and they had their own challenges being from a mixed marriage, right? So we grew up, and everything was great, wonderful family. And then when I reached the age of 12, the dark side of my father came out, and
Oh,
unfortunately, I experienced sexual abuse and rape
oh my
by my
gosh.
biological father. And this happened for 6 years. It was very confusing, very painful. And I learned to not speak up because that was part of it. I felt like it was my fault. I was told it was my fault because I had told one little thing before all the additional abuse had happened. And my mother suffered. My mother had to be knocked out on pills and taking shock treatments and everything when I told one little thing. And after that, she was unavailable. So the abuse continued and it continued much worse. So I was told it was my fault. I didn't speak up. I didn't feel comfortable speaking up. I always felt it was my fault. And I carried that into that feeling, not feeling worthy, that not speaking up into my adult life in every aspect of my adult life, in
Sure. Wow.
relationships, in work, in, saying no
Hmm.
to things that I really didn't want to do because maybe I wanted to be accepted or loved or whatever it was, right? And it was very difficult to break.
Sure. I can't even begin to imagine. Yeah. I want to acknowledge someone real quick. Lynn Serrano is joining us. Lynn, thanks for being part of the conversation.
Hi, Lynn.
How did you begin to break through that? I mean, just to especially for I can't imagine an adult telling a young girl, this is your phone. How did you begin to overcome that?
Well, you know, when I was in high school, because it was happening during high school, I found the creative realm, and I escaped to acting and singing and creating. It helped me escape myself, if it makes any sense. I could be a character, not myself. I could speak up in those characters and have those emotions and have those behaviors. And there was no consequences because it wasn't me. So I developed the creative side of me, and I loved the creative side of me. And what's great about the creative side of me is I garnered a lot of recognition for the creative side of me. Validation that I was good. I was good on the outside. So that helped me move forward in my life, in my personal life. But I didn't feel comfortable enough or confident enough to go after that 110%. So I moved into the healthcare field, and I did that, and I became very, very successful there. And during those years in college and climbing the corporate ladder, I went to therapy because I didn't know what I was doing. My behaviors, my choices, as I said, my past was driving the bus. And what I mean by that is my past, how I felt about me was driving the bus and creating what I felt I needed to do moving forward. So one day, it was funny, I went through several therapists. And then one day I found one therapist who really made a difference for me, and that he asked to tape our sessions. So I found myself in my bedroom, in the blankets, listening to the first tape session. And I heard that superwoman syndrome, like, I'm okay. This didn't affect me. I can do it, no problem. And what I realized is that I wasn't being honest with myself about my own life. I wasn't being honest about how this had really affected me. And I had been afraid to really look at those feelings and look at the stories I had made up about myself because of what happened. That was stopping me. My stories, my own stories, were stopping me from speaking up and from showing up. And so at that moment, and no one was going to fix me. And I realized that too. No therapist has, on 251 page of his book, how to fix a broken person. It's not going to work, The
magic wand's not included in the back of the book, right?
Exactly. It's not going to happen. So I basically, with his help and with, all the self-help books I could find, just went down that journey of self-discovery and awareness and trying to figure me out. Really.
Well, it's fascinating that having the opportunity to see yourself in that moment but see how you appeared, how you presented, but knowing what was really going on emotionally inside would have such an impact.
Well, it was really funny because I'd be listening to the tape and, of course, as you said, I know what I was thinking when he asked that question or he asked the question. I'm like, that was totally wrong. It's not what I was feeling at all. And I thought to myself, there's no way I'm going to get through this if I'm not honest with myself or with him. Well, I mean, what am I paying for? It doesn't make any sense. So why? And I would say that about anything in our lives. Why not be honest with ourselves about what we're going through and what we need moving forward, right, in our lives? It's important to be honest about it.
But if I'm honest with myself, it might damage my fragile male ego.
Well, let's talk about that, Jeffrey.
Yeah, let's do. No, I totally, because over time is, hopefully as we go through life's experiences, we get the opportunity to have some perspective and to
Yes.
be able to, my self-awareness has gotten better as I've gotten older.
Mhm.
Just my wife says, thank goodness. But to in intimate relationships can help a lot with that, or we
Yes.
can use it as a way to damage
Well,
relationships.
to that point, I mean, I realized that I needed therapy when, I
Mhm.
was always I was picking the wrong people. I was
Mm,
picking the wrong relationships.
yeah.
The ones that I always felt I had to prove myself that I was good enough. And if you have to constantly prove that you're good enough, it's not the right relationship. There's something going on. There's something going on that you feel like, and the other person obviously is buying into that. Uh, I realized I was alone for 10 years before I found the love of
Wow.
my life. And I had 10 years of work to do before I found the love of my life.
Well, and that's something that my wife Alice, that we joke about a lot, was that we spent a lot of time and a lot of hard work over several years before we met, becoming the people that could attract each other.
Mhm. Well, I think it's
And
very
giving, and what she
important.
didn't know is giving her enough resilience to put up with me. That's another story.
Well, and it's funny because I tell the story when I speak about how I met the love of my life, really, and who I share the stage with. We're in the Crystal Whiskey, the band, together. And every time I met someone that I really was attracted to, it was always that voice that I call it Fred in my head. The Fred in my head said, "You're not good enough," or
Mm,
he's gonna, think you can't, or whatever. And I just decided to go for it. And I had done 10 years of work to go for it. And it worked out. So it was really great. And I think the awareness about where I was in my life, who I really was, that I didn't need someone else's validation that I was good.
mhm.
That's the key. To not worry about the validation or the judgments of anybody else, because that's huge when you go have a background of abuse and trauma. It's always about the
Yeah.
validation, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's what a big transformation.
Mhm. Yeah. It was
I,
very
I
freeing. It's very freeing
yeah.
because if you think about it, when we go through life and if we're so worried about everybody's judgments and what everybody else is going to think, you're just you never want to do anything. You don't, and you're not 100% who you are. You're not being having the integrity for yourself, right?
Yes.
And then where does
And
that
yet,
lead?
but yet from stage, there's the one person in the audience that's like got their arms crossed and they're checked out playing on their phone. It's like, well, wait a minute, what am I doing wrong? Or on social media, the 5 people that are carping, about something.
Right. That's been really interesting too, because the social media thing. So, that's a whole that's a whole I mean, I'm sure you could have a
Is
whole show on social media
oh,
and how
we
that
could probably
affects your
do
psyche.
2 complete segments just on social media
Exactly.
together.
It's like how you buy into and like what does it mean? And that's the whole story thing, right? Because
Hmm.
my thing about story is it's like all you have to do is replace story with belief because that's what
Ooh,
it is. It's your story. It's your belief about yourself. What's the story you're telling yourself about yourself? What you can and can't do, or what you shouldn't do. And where did that belief, where was that belief born? And is it really your belief and your story? Because was it your parents? Was it your religion? Was it school? Was it some teacher? What? Right?
yes. How do we get commercial space systems like SpaceX? Because somebody said, well, what do you mean that's impossible? I don't think so.
Right.
Right.
And
So,
somewhat
well,
right.
just as an example, because it's something that I worked in that industry before I left corporate America. and to see where it's gone over the last 20 years. And now we have all these commercial space companies that grew up. And at the time that, what was it, 1996? And I know this because I was listening to an interview with Peter Diamandis recently. And he made the statement. He goes, yeah, when we had this big press conference in 1996 and announced the X Prize for commercial space, the $10 million award, they didn't have any money at the time. But nobody knew that. He'd been putting this together, and they had a little bit. They had, but they had, I think he said they had $500,000 or something like that. And he said, you know what? We just have to go, right? We need to. It's giving me chills. Like we need to. It will come together. We need to get this moving, though. We can't keep waiting for it to be ready. And he made the announcement, and things started falling in place. And within a decade, there's multiple companies doing the impossible, putting commercial launch systems with very innovative designs into space.
Wow. Yeah.
And it started, it's just that kind of,
talking about
what we don't know or don't, or with some people and they move ahead.
Exactly. You don't know what you don't know. And that's huge for entrepreneurs. I mean, huge. You don't know what you don't know, but there's no problem asking and listening and actually, I don't know how you feel about mentors, but I think mentors are really important for entrepreneurs.
Right? And I'd like to just jump in real quick. I was fortunate, and the older I get and the more men I talk to, the more I realize how unique this unfortunately is. I was fortunate to grow up with a dad who was very focused on mentorship because it was what he experienced growing up. And he was he was a kid of the Great Depression. And in that generation, when you still had, multi-generational families were a lot closer, if not under one roof, they were very close physically. There was a lot more of the mentorship aspect to growing up.
Yeah.
And that has helped me a lot as well, because as I've moved on in life, I recognize mentors when they arrive, and it's like, oh, okay, this is a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think mentors are awesome. I've had several mentors and coaches, and it's so great because it's such a different perspective. It gives you, I call it a power perspective. It gives you a power perspective because you have someone that you look up to that has done what you want to do or has all this knowledge that you don't know yet. And it's just it's a power position. It really is, to have a mentor. And I think that everybody needs one.
Yes, at least one. Hopefully
At
multiple.
least one. Hopefully multiple.
Hopefully they're fortunate enough to find, to have multiple mentors arrive in their journey.
That's one of the things I love about management too, is because I've had the opportunity to mentor several young ladies along into lead positions, supervisor position, manager positions. It's important. And I'm sad to see them leave when they leave the department and go somewhere else. But I feel happy that they have the skills now to move forward, and do something a little bit more with their life and where they wanted to go and what they wanted to do.
And has that become more of your role as your leadership role has grown?
I think yes.
It becomes more of a major emphasis or need to
I
be
think
successful?
yes. It really fulfills me. Number one, the job I have now is I'm a financial analyst in the collection unit, and we have many collection vendors and many staff, and I think being able to figure out new processes, critical thinking, and instill that critical thinking and analysis in my staff has been very fulfilling, because you see them grow. You see them start here, and then by the time they've gone through all the training and they've worked for you for how many years? I mean, most of my staff have worked for me for over 7 years. And that's pretty good for a manager to have that longevity for employees, because, sometimes people are there for 2-3 years, they're gone. And I pride myself on my employees being hanging around for, 6, 7, some of them 10 years. I'm like, oh my God, that's good.
So I have a little bit of a challenge question for that.
Uh-huh. Okay.
If you develop them like that and then they move on, isn't that actually a net negative to the organization?
You know what?
Because now you've lost that valuable person in
Sometimes,
that role?
most of the time, they move within the organization
Okay.
because the hospital's huge. There's 20,000
Mhm.
employees, so it's huge. But I I am a firm believer that what you give, you get.
Mhm.
And I really, and I tell them this in meetings when we have meetings, and we talk about it, and that we talk about work-life balance, all those things when you talk to your employees about that, because you have to have those conversations. I always say, if you want to move to another department, let me know how I can help you if it's where you want to go. I always say that because it's really important for them to feel like you have their best interest at heart. Because if they feel you have your best interest at heart, you're not gonna, it's not really a good management style, to be honest with you. So I
Well,
really care about them. I want them to be successful because it to
mhm.
me it's just a reflection of my management skills and my people skills.
Well, and it sounds like that creates an environment, a culture where people want to work there.
Yeah,
So you
exactly.
get it attracts the best, the people
Yeah.
that are bringing a lot to the table, because a lot of times the best team members have options,
Yes.
and
Yes.
if it's not a good experience, they'll exercise those options.
Yeah. Well, and it's so funny because you say that because right now we're going through a conversion with another hospital. And
Mhm.
in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh no, some of my really good people, are they going to want to move? Are they going to want to, do something else? And I was like, it's really interesting that I think that because it hasn't happened in the past. So it's like, but you step back and you evaluate, and go, okay, are they happy? And I guess they are because they're still here. So I guess it's good. See, they're still see that you no matter how you go through life and how much work you've done and how much you've figured things out, you still have doubt. You still can have doubt,
Sure.
right?
Well, and is that also a sign that you're continuing to stretch yourself and continuing to
Hmm.
grow? Because you're
Hmm.
in moving into an area where, yeah, it's natural to have a little doubt because it's something new, and it's like, "Yeah, I got this, but man, I'm not 100% sure on
Right,
how."
exactly. Exactly. I'm like, okay, let me just check. Let me just check things. I don't, I gotta let's see. That's funny.
Uh,
Uh,
from a leadership perspective,
mhm,
has because you've been successful in film and TV production,
mhm.
on Broadway, in so many different career paths in different venues. Has how you've thought about your role as a leader uh, shifted and evolved as your career's grown over time?
That's a really good question. Really good question. And when I the first thing I wanted to say was yes. And I'll tell you
Hmm.
why. Because when I started on my journey, it was 30 years ago. I still had a lot of healing to do. I still had a lot of work to do on myself. And at that point, years ago, when I started in management, it was about climbing the corporate ladder. It was about proving myself. It was about showing everybody how good I was. And that's what it was about. Because if I got a next position, if I got the lead, if I got the supervisor, if I got the manager, if I got the director, whatever the next was, that meant, meaning, remember, story,
Hmm.
that I was good.
Hmm.
So the answer is yes. When I started, that's where I was. Now I am totally confident that I am good. That I
Well,
am
and did at
anyway,
that time,
yeah.
because 30 years ago, workplace
Mhm.
was very different.
Yes,
Did
it
you
was.
did you have to be even better being a woman climbing the corporate ladder at that time
You know what?
in order to succeed?
It was interesting because I didn't encounter a lot of men in the
Okay.
administrative part of the hospitals I was at. It was all the women. They were nurses. It was women. So
Mhm.
the answer to that is no, I didn't.
Okay.
Now, a little different now. So I could say that's a little different now, and challenging sometimes, but then it was not. I really didn't encounter that. Mhm.
Okay. I was
Yeah.
curious because it's a different environment. It's like I
Yes.
started
Yeah.
out in manufacturing and engineering and product development in
Mm.
very much male dominated environment. And the
Yeah.
women that were like in product development, the women in the 1980s that were creating a career path and getting the promotions at that time were such exceptional engineers at what they did that,
Mhm.
it's like I've heard it said, interviewed Laurel Rolls, who was the second woman to achieve partner at Deloitte at the time
Deloitte&
that
and
she
Touche,
worked
yeah.
there. And
Mhm.
well, it was before Deloitte and Touche. She was
Oh,
very
really?
wanted to be, yeah. So it was
Oh.
in the earlier days, and she said, there were things that she experienced because I made a choice at a certain point where I just decided, you know what, rather than fight this, I'm just going to be so good that they can't ignore me.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's before I get caught up in the story of how that played out and lose my train of thought.
It's okay.
I have to be careful. I'll start telling a story and completely derail our conversation.
It's okay. It's
But it
okay
was,
to do that. It's your show.
it when she said that, it immediately echoed to, the friends that I had, the women that,
Yeah.
that were on that path in the 80s. And it was like, it was
Yeah.
a tough road for them because it was kind of like, well, yeah, great, but you're not going to go far was pretty much what they were up against.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
might want to, this is great, maybe good for a couple years. You may want to consider a different path after that. And,
That's so hard.
some of
And,
them did really well,
yeah, that's really hard.
but
And having a voice in that environment is
mhm.
very hard. Yeah.
Which you had touched on before, and having a voice as a leader
Mhm.
and working through the stuff because you experienced abuse and trauma at a level that no one should ever have to go through.
Mhm.
Everyone experiences their own uh, trauma setbacks along the way.
Mhm.
Does that affect how that our ability to have the voice and how the voice comes out as a leader? Because it seems it's really such to be effective in a leadership role at a really as a really high level leader. I look at some of the leaders that I've met along the way, has been mentored by, and they brought something, as a person, they brought something to the table that many others didn't.
Mhm.
To do that, do we need to really focus on working through those issues so that it doesn't come out in a negative way or impact?
I believe so because it's reaction. It's reaction to uh, that's why the awareness and the self-awareness is so important, and to work through those stories and what triggers those stories about ourselves. I know there were times when I would clam up because in a meeting or something, I'd speak up and I'd say something. And then another manager or the director or someone's like, "Oh, we're not going to deal with that today," or we're not. And then I just shrank. I didn't speak up. I didn't say, well, I didn't, not defend myself. It's not the right word for it, but I didn't speak up and address that after the fact, maybe not in the meeting, but after the fact and say, when we were in the meeting, I really shared something that I thought was really important, and I felt like I was just shut down. So can we talk about that? And that's the kind of thing that I would have never done. Now I do that if that ever happens, and I have a voice, and it depends on the environment. Obviously, you're not going to confront somebody
Well,
depending on the deal, in every meeting
yeah,
or
there's
something.
the
But
context and how
yeah,
to go about it.
exactly, exactly. So, but I think that knowing and keeping the integrity of what I know and being able to approach
Mhm.
someone, no matter who they are, director, VP, whatever they are, and be able to voice my opinion about something is important.
Sure.
And I had to find that.
And to be able to say, hey, this is important. We need to address this now because, so if not now, when can we?
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I'm going to jump around a little bit because
Sure.
your band keeps coming to mind. And I so want to ask about that. The lead singer in a country band.
I am.
How did that come about?
Okay. So this is the story. So I was at a benefit called Hogs and Horses. It's a real thing. Cowboys, motorcycles, cowboys, motorcycles, and horses, right? So it's a benefit for the troops. And I'm sitting there at this table with a couple of friends, and this handsome cowboy comes in, Marlboro man, walking around. I'm like, oh, my type. Marlboro man. He was walking around, having no problem attracting attention, right? And so he comes around and talked to me, and we hit it off. And that old voice, I told you, that old voice in my head, you're not good enough, whatever. Left that out the window. Talked to him. We hit it off, and he's into music. He's a doctor. He's a PhD in electrical engineering.
Oh my gosh. An engineer that plays in a...
Yeah. He designed missiles for Desert Storm. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
The radar. So anyway, you and him have something in common. But he plays music. He was just starting to play at open mic, this open mic at this place we're going. And we started to play, and the people said, why don't you get a band together? I'm like, yeah, because I used to, I'm a professional singer. I mean, I studied opera for 8 years when I was younger. And then I went into musicals because I just didn't want to work that hard, to be honest with you. I did not want to work that hard. Opera, singing 8 hours a day, not going to work. So, but anyway, we hit it off. And so Crystal Whiskey, and the name is so funny because my name is Veronica Crystal Young. Yeah. So I took Crystal, and then whiskey is his drink. So I'm like, why don't we call ourselves Crystal Whiskey? There you go. So we've been performing for eight years now in the Southern California area, and mostly in Acton and the high desert areas. But I just moved out to Ventura. So we're looking in some, they have a lot more music in Ventura area. So we're looking around that area too. So yeah. CrystalWhiskey.com.
CrystalWhiskey.com. That's right.
That's us.
Got to look it up as you're watching this. Soon as you're done watching this, go to
and you know what?
CrystalWhiskey.com so you can get some music while they're reading your book.
We are playing because of COVID, everything shut down. So the place that we normally played once a month shut down. It's been shut down for like 2 years. So for the first time, we played once in January. They brought us back, and then everything shut down again. I'm like, okay. So now they're opening up. And so this weekend, we are back at Vincent Hill Saloon in Acton. We're going to be there for 3 hours playing our music. So it's going to be fun.
That'll be on. When will you be playing? Will it be Saturday night, or we say this
Saturday
weekend?
Night?
Saturday night.
6 to 9. Yeah. It feeds my soul.
Yes. Well, and doing things like that, speaking of that, feeding the soul, being able to do things like that, to hone a craft like singing. Excuse me, playing with a band. The person that hired me for my first job out of college was a lead singer in a rock band. They still gig to this day.
Really?
And it's 50s and 60s rock and roll review, and the white zoot suits, hair slicked back, the whole thing, and they put on a great show.
Yeah,
put on a great show, and it was just interesting how that interacts with your ability to lead and who you are, and in developing different parts of our personalities that help us be more effective just as a person. I mean, is it really more about being effective as a person in life overall versus the narrower focus of I think there's a tendency to go, well, I want to be a leader doing this. And it becomes so narrow that does that put unnecessary boundaries or constraints on areas?
It's really interesting because here's the way I'll answer that. I think having the creativity and the joy of creativity and being a happy person because you are expressing yourself and being creative or whatever is your passion. Your passion may be numbers. Your passion may be, architecture. I mean, whatever your passion is, to me, if you keep that passion and still are in a leadership position, maybe not necessarily within that passion, but like me, outside of my passion in the healthcare field, I think it spills over into being a great leader, because if you are passionate about something, you are willing to show yourself and express yourself 100% of the time. You are willing to be vulnerable and to show yourself and say, hey, this is me. I'm singing, or I'm building this building, or I'm writing this book, or whatever it is. And you are putting yourself out there for judgment. And if you put yourself out there and you're vulnerable, I think that's a good thing for leadership, because there's a lot of leadership out there that is like, I can't be vulnerable. I can't show, that, I'm worried about something, or that I have feelings, or just like I did. Like I had feelings. I can't show that I have feelings, and I'll be soft, right? That'll be soft. Can't be soft, right? So I think it all ties in, Jeff. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
And
it brings more the whole person to the table.
yeah, it brings the whole person. And I think vulnerability in leadership is a strength. Huge, huge, because the story I told you at the top of the hour, I mean, it's like that.
Mm-hmm.
I had to show more vulnerability. And I was from the old school of like, I can't be, I've got to move on and do work. Well, yeah, but you can still have a little empathy for the employees, and show it.
And it takes just a little bit.
It does. It does. It does.
It's not a 30-minute
No,
hug it out session. It's
I
just
don't have
just a
time.
little bit extra.
I don't have time for that.
Sure. Well, it's like saw a study a number of years ago where they said, doctors that spend like, it was 5 minutes instead of 12 minutes, spend 15 minutes with patients, have dramatically less malpractice suits.
Interesting.
From the patients.
Yeah.
And I don't know, those numbers probably aren't exactly right, but the scale, it was like going, really? It was like just an extra, it was only about 10% more time, even though it's a real packed schedule for them to see everybody, that it made such a huge difference in the patient experience and in the relationship.
Because you feel like they care. That's why.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're in and out, writing it down, and it's like, okay, you're doing the job, but do you care about what's going on? You're right.
So then if they have a question, then they're more open to getting answers, working things through. They're less open to, I would imagine, to someone going, we could sue them and get you some money.
Right,
and it's like,
exactly.
Well, but I actually,
but I like
if you
the
actually
doctor.
like them, you're less likely to go, wow, why don't? It's like, no, you know what? They're helping me. Why would I do that?
That's true.
Makes the threshold, makes the threshold a lot higher, more rational, perhaps.
Very true. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move on from that. That's dangerous territory. But in the relationship, it affects, I would imagine, just a little bit extra effort from a leadership perspective in listening to and being vulnerable and open with the other, the people that you're leading, results in a stronger relationship that's more resilient.
It is. It absolutely is. And I really believe, and that happens with me and my bosses too, because I ask for, because to me, work and life balance is so important in leadership. And you have to make sure your employees know that you care about their work and their life, and that there's a balance there. Because if it's all about work, you lose the people. And it's not, I tell my employees this all the time. when they call and say, oh, I can't come in because I have to take care of the kids, or, they're sick, or my parents, I have to, and this happens also, I have to take care of my parents, I have to take them to the doctors, whatever. And they're worried. And I'm like, don't be worried. Family comes first. Family is more important than this job. And I will say those words every single time because I believe that. And if it comes to their family and their work, and I realize that work brings in the money and they have to do that. But I mean, like right now, my mom I'm going through some stuff with my mom. She had to move to a skilled nursing facility, and I had to leave, and I felt bad. And
Oh, wow.
my boss never gives me any, he goes, go. And it's like, you feel free, and you do feel, as you were saying, you feel very, good about that relationship. Feel very good about that relationship.
It's a place people want to be, a team you want to be part of.
Yes, absolutely.
And with the fact, and given the context for that is a hospital system, I would imagine that then affects the patient experience as well.
Well, and I'm not on the clinical side. I'm on the administrative side. So I'm on the billing and collection side. I'm not in the patient care side.
But I mean, in terms of
as far as leadership, you mean, yeah.
Yeah, when there's that type of leadership, it affects the patient experience. It affects the customer experience.
Yes.
It affects how people are, how understanding those that have face-to-face contact with customers or patients, how they respond and then deal with the situations and stress and turbulence that comes up from those interactions.
Yes. Well, and they have a lot more to contend with because they are frontline with patients. We are frontline with patients on the phone when we talk about, customer service or billing or anything like that. But they're front of the line when the patient's actually in the hospital. And I know that our hospital is, we were number 1 in California and number 2 in the nation. So
wow. Number 1 in California, number 2 in the nation.
Correct.
That's incredible. Congratulations.
Yeah, it was, we all got mugs. Where's my mug? My mug's back in there. I have a number of mugs that say that. So it must be true. That's true. No, I'm very proud to work for Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. And
yes, a legendary name in the
wonderful hospital world. And a great experience. I've been there 22 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and the fact that your team tenure runs 7 years, when most of the time people are moving at 3, 5 at the most, if they're career oriented.
Yeah.
They're taking that next step. That's incredible.
Yeah.
I want to jump to something else that's been tickling the back of my mind. Where did you find time to write 2 books? Right, you're very involved with you're very involved with your family. You have this incredible career as an executive in healthcare. You're front woman for a successful country band, and then you write books.
I do, and I speak and I coach.
And you do speaking quite well, by the way. And as you're watching this, I've had an opportunity to hear Veronica speak, and we interacted on in an event we were both at and part of a couple of weeks ago, which led to this great interaction. I'm so glad that you're here today.
Thank you.
But with great effect. How does that add in to such a
it's really
full schedule?
It's really, I think for me, I've been so busy on my journey of life, really, to be honest with you. My trauma responses early in life were like busy. So I didn't have to deal with anything.
Wow.
And I'll just be very honest about it. And that's a trauma response. Busy, right?
Yeah.
And so this is why I love vacation so much, because I always tell everybody it takes me 3 days to wind down, because it does. And I am a multitasker. So as the experience goes. So yes, I wrote the books. I had been writing one book for a while, just writing notes in my journal, things like that. And so I expanded that. I actually, it's so funny, Jeff, because I'm going to tell you about the one time the first book I wrote a chapter in an anthology book over probably, I'd say 15, 16 years ago. And a marketing expert brought all 25 women together because it's a women's anthology book. And then we all had a chapter, and my chapter was called Powerful, Purposeful Living. And it was when I started my journey, or was halfway through my therapy journey, figuring out things, right? Figuring out life, and that life was about choices. I didn't bring up anything about the abuse. So a marketing expert brought us in the room, and he asked all 25 women our why, for why we wrote our chapters, so he could, market the book. So for the first time, I stood up and I shared my history of childhood sexual abuse and how I wanted to help other women with a little roadmap, even though I didn't say anything about the abuse in the book, about what success meant and how to get there. And the marketing expert said to me, "No one wants to hear that."
What?
Yeah. So I was traumatized all over again.
Yeah.
And I didn't write for 15 years. So then I, got back to my therapy and all that other stuff. Anyway, long story short, The Other Side of Pain was my first book after that. And that was released 2.5 years ago. That's it's my story, my journey, and some tips about overcoming childhood sexual abuse. And then I had my other book, Shameless, which is called 7 Steps to Reclaim Your Power. And I take you through some of the critical courage steps that I took to overcome the childhood sexual abuse. So those are the two.
Really articulates that roadmap
that
you started to talk about so many years ago.
Yep. Yeah. And then I did another anthology book called It Is Done, that is actually an international bestseller.
Oh, congratulations.
So I was happy about that. That was the last one, and that was like last year. So I was happy about that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
But I like that. The choices are so, it changes everything. It's like Sliding Doors or something? It was actually a movie where it's like you made the choice that you go left or go right, and follow the life paths.
Well, people, I think another thing that I learned, and that, there's sometimes in our lives that we don't feel we have any choices. We feel like we have to do this because this is the only choice. And people have to realize that's a choice. It's not the only choice, but it's the choice of where you want to go and who you are. And so we have to make peace with that. And I get this sometimes from clients. It's like, I have to do this for my kids, and I have to do this for my husband, and I have to do this for work. And I'm like, you don't have to do anything. But you as a person, it's important for you to do this because that's who you are. So make peace with that, and don't say you have no choice, because you do.
There's always a choice somewhere.
Yeah, there is. And it's always, our choices are who we want to be. Unless you're not aware that those choices are coming from a past experience that you have not addressed.
Oof.
Comes circle.
Power in that statement.
Comes full circle.
Comes full circle. Right back, but it's back to that deeply personal. What are we carrying forward, and how are we dealing with it, or not dealing with it?
Or not. I have this story of a superwoman, because when I was younger, I used to ride this bike around the neighborhood, and I'd put this red blanket on my neck, and I'd be superwoman, right? I could do anything, be anything. We all thought that when we were younger,
yeah, right? I love that. That is awesome.
We all thought that when we were younger. So I wore that superwoman cape when I was pushing up, the corporate ladder. I wore that superwoman cape. Nothing's going to affect me. I'm getting through this. I'm good. I've been proving myself, right? And it's so funny, because when I listened to that tape from the therapist, I realized I was hiding behind that superwoman cape because I wasn't addressing and being honest about how I was showing up. So I just ripped that Superwoman cape off and dug deep, and here I am.
Wow. What a perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what would your, could you give a starting point tip or a piece of advice for women that are, perhaps newer in their leadership journey or looking at a choice that they need to make on how to put the best foot forward, so to speak, or to approach that choice in the best way possible?
Yeah. I would say what comes to mind for me mostly when I talk about leadership and I talk about starting down a road is honesty. Honesty with yourself about what you really want and why you really want it. And honesty about others and about what your stories are about what others may bring. And sometimes it's hard to admit when we're wrong because we feel like we're less than, and our worthiness is involved. But if we're honest with ourselves about what we really want and why, we will be happier. And if we don't like what we discover about ourselves, guess what? You can always change it. And it's really important to know that you can change something that you feel like, because I'll take an example. One of the things that I realized about myself was that I was always choosing the wrong men. And I was doing it because I wanted the most handsome person, or there was some ulterior motive. It was the look of it, right? And when I learned that about myself, and I realized it's all, based on my past, I was like, man, I did this to myself. So then what's the next step you do? You beat yourself up. You go down that road of, why did I do that? And you beat yourself up some more. You know what? You got to give yourself some grace. Give yourself some grace because you dealt with what you dealt with at the time, the best that you could at the time. So I had to learn that and be on that pendulum of giving myself grace over and over again when I realized, oh, I did this. Why did I do that to myself? I did it to myself. I should suffer the consequences. No, you did it, but guess what? There's a choice. You can move on and do something different. So it's really important. Honesty is really important. And sometimes we learn things about ourselves that we're not too happy about. But just be honest, hold on to that honesty, and really ask yourself, how do you want to be moving forward? How do you want to be? Take radical accountability for the past and say, yes, I did that, but guess what? I'm not there today, and I'm going to move differently today. That's the important piece.
I love that. Because it keeps the future bright.
And it's open. It's about opportunities, right? It's about boundaries and opportunities, and the boundaries that we set on ourselves, really. We set on ourselves with our stories.
And our choices lead there.
Yes, they do.
Can either expand those or restrict them. The neat thing being, for what I'm hearing, what I heard you just say is like the most positive part of that is, if I'm making choices that are restricting going forward, I can change the choices.
Absolutely.
Wow. I'm watching the time. It's top of the hour again. It's like,
where's the time gone?
So fast. Yes. This has been fun.
It's been fun. It's been great.
And I love that message about choices. As you're watching this, what choices you're making are you giving yourself some grace over the choices you've made so that it's possible to make a different choice moving forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so if you, one of the things I did, if I may share, Jeff, really
Please.
quickly, one of the things that helped me get through my healing period is affirmations. And so I created a critical courage affirmation card deck and to reinforce, confidence and mindset, and to help identify that self-talk, that Fred in your head that you need to override many times. So that's out there, and I'd love to offer that to your listeners. It's at www.theaffirmationcards.com.
www.theaffirmationcards.com. I can spell this right so we can make sure everybody gets that. Theaffirmationcards.com.
Yes.
Let's see. Can I spell correctly?
www.theaffirmationcards.com.
Oh, 2 Ds. Oh, are you kidding me?
That was close. This close, Jeff. This close.
Welcome to 21st Century Television as you're watching this live and interactive. And when I can't spell, it shows right up live in the stream. The affirmation with 2 F's. Cards with 1 D.com.
There you go.
There we go. Second time's a charm.
All right. There we go.
Hey. So that would be great. Veronica's gift to you, the affirmationcards.com, the set of affirmation cards that she's created based on what has helped her and how she's mentoring.
Yeah, they're great cards. I'm really happy with the deck. So
excellent. Veronica, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. This has really been fun, and I'd like to leave everybody with my phrase: be kind, be brave, and be love.
It's beautiful. Be kind, be brave, and be loved. And thank you for watching this and joining us tonight.
Bye-bye.